It's 5:45, so we will begin with the agenda for our public hearing on the 2022-23 proposed budget. So I will turn it over to Marcus.
Good evening, everybody. Everyone can hear me okay? So we are here for our public hearing for the 2022-23 proposed budget for next school year. I'm going to go through the presentation that we have paper copies and is linked in the agenda. And to start off, we will discuss the millage rates that we certified last month at our board meeting. For our operating millage, we are levying the maximum allowed 18 mills on non-homestead and commercial property. Our recreation millage, 0.4975 mills. And then our debt millage does not change. We're still levying the 6.2 mills that the voters have approved. We just reallocated a little bit differently each year between the three debt issues, depending on our debt schedule for that current year. Some of the revenue assumptions that we made in creating this budget was a budgeted pupil count of approximately 4,440 students, which is about 140 FTE students than we have currently this year. Again, we won't have student enrollment information until later in the fall, October, November timeframe. Our foundation allowance, we've included in this budget of a $200 per FTE increase from $8,700 to $8,900 per pupil. Again, we do not have a state budget at this time, so these are our guesses and assumptions that we're using to come up with this budget, and we will amend those at different times throughout the year as we get final numbers in the fall and the spring. We take second and third looks at our budget and make amendments as necessary. We also did not change the current retirement rate, again, due to not having the state budget, so we plan that flat currently at 43.28%. The next two pages give a little bit of historical data on the foundation allowance and student count over the last 7 to 10 years. And just to give an idea of how we kind of come up with some of those assumptions. So again, that $200 increase in foundation allowance per FTE, if we go back pre-COVID for the 7 years prior, we were averaging about $155 increase. So we're kind of keeping in line with that average as we plan our budget. And of course, we'll amend it as we get final numbers in the fall. So you kind of get a little bit of that historical data. On the next page on the student count, you can see the 4,440 that we're estimating at this time and how that compares with previous years. You'll notice the year 2020-21 has an asterisk by it. If anybody remembers, during that year, the first full year after the pandemic, the state came up with a super blend or a special calculation to count FTE to help districts out through the pandemic, which is a little different than we typically use to count students. So that number, that 4810, comes with an asterisk. I did a little bit of research into what our numbers would have looked like if it was calculated based on all the other years that we typically use the similar calculation. We would have been about 4,600, give or take, students in 2021 if we did not have that super blend, which is the way it was designed, was to help districts through the pandemic, and knowing that there was students, the state was losing a lot more students through COVID, obviously. Michigan has been in declining enrollment for over the last decade. I think figures put out by the state have it where they estimated the state has lost over 50,000 students since the start of the pandemic. Which typically prior to COVID, the state was averaging probably about 10 to 12,000 student loss per year on average. So that was, you can see that big jump due to the pandemic. And as you can see, if we had used the regular calculation, we would have been at 4620 during that 2020 year. This year, our FTE was about 4580, so we would have been about 40 students lower than the year before in a typical calculated year. So pretty much in line. Again, those are estimated numbers. We'll have our final enrollment in the fall. We typically budget anywhere between 140 and 160 students down, just to be on the conservative side. And as you can see, the hard numbers that we put in throughout the years, We've been averaging about a 60 to 70-ish the last few years student decline, so it's kind of a worst case scenario at this point as our best guess. On the expenditure side, some assumptions that we used in creating this budget was an increase in the hard cap, health insurance hard cap, meaning the amount that the districts are allowed to cover health insurance for employees by 1.3%. Again, we don't know what our health insurance rates for 2023 will be yet, so we'll get those again later in the fall, which will be reflected in future amendments. Utility rates, a flat increase along with that retirement rate because that's part of the state budget piece that we just don't have yet, and other staff additions and other adjustments as we fill retirements and things like that. So after we've used all those assumptions and gone through all of our historical trends, we're at this time proposing total general fund revenues in the amount of just over $69 million and expenses just over $63 million, which at this point in time today would give us an increase of approximately $5.8 million to fund balance. Our current projected fund balance that we're looking to end this year with is about $11.6 million. So we would be estimating that the end of next year, and I see my data is wrong, it should say 6/30/23, of $17.4 million fund balance or 27.6% of general fund expenditures. Which I included this slide last year as well, the fund balance and how it's gone over the years. As you can see, since the pandemic, our fund balance has risen dramatically with all of the funding that we've received and other things the district has done. And then I've also given those kind of baseline numbers of where we would be at with a 5% fund balance and a 15% fund balance. I use that 5% fund balance because that's the threshold that the state uses. If you fall below that, it's a sign of an early warning sign for financial distress. That 15% number is where a lot of districts like to be as a comfort number for a fund balance percentage. And you can see this year and next year we plan to be above that 15% mark. In creating the budget, it's not just the general fund. We do have other non-major revenue funds, non-major funds that we service as well, including food service, school activity funds, our debt service, and our capital projects funds, which include the 2018 bond, building and site, the stadium improvement fund, and all of those go into all of the proposed budgets that you're going to see tonight. And I did want to go over some more detailed information in the next handout, which is our original budget summary. Again, the first page you'll see there, which kind of summarizes all of the different funds. Our general or operating funds, 2 special revenues, our debt service and capital project funds have their own columns. And again, you'll see that we kind of break down all of the revenues by category, whether they're property taxes, federal money, state money, and our expenditures by what they are, instruction or not or otherwise. And then you'll see at the bottom again that $5.8 million projected increase in fund balance. One other item to note, under the food service fund, you'll see we plan on spending about $1 million more than we plan to take in next year. And again, we've talked about this all year. We have an excess fund balance in food service, and the requirement by the MDE is that once you reach a certain point, you're required to spend down a certain amount, and we've had a plan throughout the year to spend this, and this is just showing spending that excess fund balance down, which will still leave us with a fairly healthy fund balance in the school fund at the end of next year. On the next page, this is a graph that will show how our district is funded. And as you can see, the majority of our budget, or about approximately 60%, comes from the state and that monthly state aid that we receive. So we are very dependent on that state budget that comes out. And again, that's why all the assumptions at this time, just because there is no signed state budget at this time to go off of. It's just kind of give you an idea, most of our budget comes from the state, and taxes accounts for about 75% of our annual budget. I would skip ahead to page 4 next, just to kind of show how some of the expenditures are broken off. And so under the 22-23 proposed budget, the biggest category of expenses are instruction and instructional support, which make up about 76% of our proposed budget, which makes sense because that is our business, is instructing students and supporting them. So we're showing that we're spending our dollars in the right buckets, which if you look compared to our amended budget for this year, comes out to about 72%. So we're looking to put even more money into the instructional portion of our budget next year, which is what you want to see. The next slide just breaks out those expenditures a little bit further by what type of expenditures they are, so whether they're salaries and benefits, purchase services, supplies, and other expenses. And again, salary and benefits, or our people, are the biggest part of our budget and the reason that we're here. They make up a little over 75% of our expenditures as salary and benefits. This year, currently, it's about 73%, so it's in line kind of with that. You have cost of living increases and things like that for the difference in percentage there. And then behind that graph just breaks out how that graph is made up by what function it is, whether it's elementary or secondary or special ed. And that's just all the backup that goes into creating the graph on the slides before. Skipping ahead to page 8, we'll come to the proposed budgets for all of the other funds. So you'll see the food service fund first on page 8. So again, you'll have our actual numbers when we wound up in 2021, our final amended projected numbers for this year, and then our proposed budget for next year for that food service fund. Again, you'll see, going back to that, spending down the fund balance, the little over $1 million that we'll spend in fund balance this next year per our plan that we've been working on throughout the year. And then the same for the other funds as well. We have our student activity or internal account funds that students will fundraise for and use those for whatever appropriate events those fundraisers are for. The debt service fund, again, these would be debt taxes that are collected to help pay off the bonds that we've issued over the years. As you can see, we have a positive or healthy fund balance in that as well. And that goes 100% towards paying down the long-term debt of the district. And then the capital projects fund balance, which you'll see is shrinking down to almost nothing, about $660,000 at the end of next year, which makes sense because by the end of next year we'll be done with 98% of the bond projects, and the stadium project will be done as well, which is what comprises that capital projects fund. So that would make sense that we will be almost depleted at that time. And those are the two handouts that I have on the budget. At this time, I would open it up for any input or questions on assumptions or anything that you've seen tonight.
Yeah, if you have a question, this is the time for questions. So, sure, Mr. Hastings, can I have you come up and use the mic? And I know it's a little out of formal, but that way the people online can hear us. Otherwise, I'm worried they wouldn't hear you.
What my question was, as I was saying, just going through the materials provided by Mr. Leone, and there are actually it's very, there's a lot to go through. But the one that really caught my eye is the graph depicting the decline in the student count. It's gone down approximately 25% since 2012, 2013. Now, we all know the city of Jackson is not growing in terms of population. It's basically flat or stagnant. I'm just wondering, where are these kids going if they're de-enrolling from JPS? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
So our student count goes down about 140 kids a year, plus or minus. We do see schools of choice. The largest schools of choice takers from us are Vandercook Lake, Northwest, and Western. They each account for about 600 kids each, and that hasn't changed much in the last 6 years. So those same numbers kind of have been the same every year, and no one else is really changing their count. So if I look at the county, our county numbers are down enrollment-wise, and about half of the districts in the county are losing, and half the kids half the districts are growing. Two major reasons for that. Again, a graying society. We are older. I use myself as an example. I have 5 kids that went through the district, and I'm not having any more. So I'm not sure where that looks at, but that's a piece of it. But that doesn't preclude the pieces that we do to try to offset those enrollment declines. But without a doubt, we've seen that. And then, as Marcus said, we estimate that the state loses is a graying state as well. We lose about 10,000 students per year as a state. And then when you saw COVID hit that year, it dropped by 50,000, and some of that has to do with the census population of Michigan and what that looks like. I mean, if we kind of take a look at the aging population or Michigan as an exodus state versus a growing state, that would be a challenge, right? So,
And real quick follow-up, since obviously student funding follows student enrollment, I mean, this is a very unusual time because, okay, you have your millage money and this ESSER 3, gigantic money drops from the federal government. Are you concerned that as we move through the decade that it's going to be hard for you to support all the things you want to do with JPS with the drop in enrollment?
So I'm going to say this prior to ESSER, okay, we have every year had to right size our budget and live within our budget. So if we go back, we had 1 year, 2015-16, I'd have to open it up again, where we dipped below the 5% threshold. And then we bounced back up and have been able to stay above that 5% threshold. But without a doubt, this district prior to, well, you can see the trend.
Yeah.
It's always been kind of in that 4 to 5% range. So this is without a doubt unprecedented, which is why so much of the ESSER dollars are flowing into fund balance because that's one-time money. So we know we won't get that money again tomorrow. I won't get that money again next year. So that's the reason is we know it's going to rain, so we're saving the money for that rainy day.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, then.
Okay, we will close this public hearing for the proposed budget. The next item on the agenda is the ESSER 3 stakeholder hearing, so we will go into that. Marcus?
Thank you. Again, thanks for everybody coming out for the stakeholder meeting for ESSER 3. So again, I've got a few handouts here, a small presentation. I'll go through some of these sheets here and then kind of explain our budget development process and again open it up for community public input as we move through the grant process with this. So just to give everybody a little bit of history on the ESSER grants, and we call them ESSER grants in the schools, but ESSER 3, which is also known as the American Rescue Plan, was signed into law March 11th, 2021. It was almost $2 trillion in economic stimulus package, of which $122 billion of that was slated for education across the country. JPS's allocation out of that $122 billion was just over a little bit over $22 million. This is the third round of ESSER funding. As you know, we've had a couple of rounds of stimulus funding before this, ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 over the last few years. And you can see they're kind of rolling out a year behind each other. So the first round of ESSER funding, the expenditure period actually ends this month. Next summer, the second round of ESSER funding expenditure period will end, and then ESSER 3 runs currently through June 30th, 2024. So we have a couple of years to help spend these funds. One requirement that's unique to ESSER 3 is that 20% of the funds allocated are required to go towards addressing learning loss brought on through the COVID-19 pandemic. And we'll go over that as I explain the budget development and what we've put in there so far to this point for learning loss. Some of the allowable uses of ESSER 3 funds on the next page, which are some of the same allowable uses that we've seen through the first few rounds of ESSER: purchasing cleaning supplies and PPE, educational technology, which we've done a lot of those two categories with the first few rounds of ESSER, increasing mental health supports, adding instructional support for intervention or special education, facility upgrades, indoor air quality, things like that, repairing and improving facilities to reduce virus transmission, addressing learning loss, and continuing to employ and/or hire new staff. So how do we get to decide how we're going to spend this on? So, you know, the district and all districts want to involve the communities, especially with this large of an allocation of stimulus funding. What JPS did is we've sent out, earlier in the fall, back in November, we sent out paper emails. We sent out over 6,000 paper surveys to the committee. I think the district spent a little over $7,000 sending those out. We did put out mass communications through our email, Facebook, phone robocalls, and the JPS app. We did these weekly, starting in mid-November, and ran that right through up until almost through Christmas break, through mid-December. We reached about 9,600 people each time we put out our mass communications digitally. So that was done earlier in the fall. JPS submitted the initial application to accept the ESSER 3 funds in December, which was the first step. Then we went back to the table and came up with a plan of use narrative, or how we initially planned to use the funds or spend the funds. And this is just the original submission. We are able to amend this application definitely as we move along throughout the process and learn things and stuff happens. We've had initial budget development in June this month, along with our stakeholder meeting tonight right now. Our plan is, after tonight, hearing any public feedback tonight, over the next few days or a week, we'll be planning on submitting the grant to MDE for approval within the next week or so, after we collect any feedback and incorporate that into our final budget submission initially. And again, we're able to go back and amend this as needed as well. And then hopefully our goal is to hopefully get that grant funding approval prior to the start of the school year. And then we're not done. After we receive our grant award notification, we'll be back every 6 months to update the community with how the grant is going, anything that we need to amend, any more input that comes up along the way that we might want to include until the grant is fully spent. And we do plan on taking the next 2 school years through June of '24 to spend these funds. Moving on to the next page, we received over almost 600 responses to all of our surveys, both paper and digitally. Almost 500 of them came from parents and community members, the rest being students, staff, would make up the rest of that number. And more than half of the responses came from underserved populations, such as special education students, students that identify as homeless, English ELL students, free and reduced eligible families. So that's great to see a good mix of everybody in the community responding to the surveys. Some of the top-ranked allowable use categories that people mentioned in the surveys that they would like to see JPS use the funds for include delivering interventions and addressing learning loss, providing SEL opportunities such as additional counseling, mental health, wellness opportunities, and retaining staff and/or hiring new staff to either maintain and/or try to lower class sizes, again, to address learning loss and help prevent the spread of COVID-19 through less kids in the class. And then the last page, I've just included contact email information for both myself, Julie, and Jeremy Patterson. So if anybody has any questions in the next week or so or anytime, feel free to reach out to us with questions on ESSER 3, and we'll be glad to get back to you. So then the next piece that I would like to share with everyone is our initial budget plan. And I know this might look a little weird or complex if you haven't looked at one of these before. So I'll go over some of the major categories of what we've initially put into our budget for submission. Again, I mentioned that 20% requirement to address learning loss. So for our allocation of $22 million, that comes out to a little, almost $4.5 million that we're required to spend addressing learning loss. Some of the things that we have decided to initially put into our budget for submission would be screening tools, assessment tools to help identify those that need further interventions or one-on-one help, updating curriculum, K through 12 all across the board. I think out of the $4.5 million, we're initially putting about $1.5 million into updating our curriculum across all grade levels and subjects, ELA, math, science, social studies. And then, again, looking to bring in additional staff, retained staff in the special education world to help address learning loss with some of those underserved populations in the district. And that would make up that 20%, that $4.5 million addressing learning loss. We've also included a line item for more PPE and sanitation items and equipment as necessary. Again, this is where that amendment process comes in. So if we see that we don't need it, we will look to other ways and the community input and how to spend those funds. Also providing mental health services, another asked for item in the community survey responses. We're looking to outfitting sensory rooms in some of our programs and buildings to better meet the SEL needs of our students to help keep them in school, which will hopefully help stabilize and increase daily attendance for students dealing with mental health and academic challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then again, the rest of the funds, as Mr. Beal alluded to earlier, are going to go back into retaining and hiring staff to maintain and/or lower class sizes, and to go towards that fund balance to help the district continue operation for years to come. So again, those are the two handouts that I wanted to go over. I know we've also included the complete survey results and trends from those community surveys that we sent out earlier in the year, along with our initial plan of use narrative that the district came up with. So again, at this time, I would welcome any community input or questions or comments on our budget development or the ESSER 3 process, so we can take that back and incorporate that into our planning. Yes, would you mind coming up here?
It's a short question. What exactly is a sensory room and what do you do there?
So when there are times that a student is feeling very upset or dysregulated and they're having trouble controlling emotions, and sometimes school can just become a lot for students that that may be autistic or just are having big emotions that day. A sensory room is a nice area for them to go where there may be activities that they could do to relieve stress, but it's also a very calming area for them, so that it gives them an opportunity to reset, to calm themselves so that they can rejoin the classroom. Sorry? Yes. Yep. They would be visiting with someone. There isn't somebody that stays in a sensory room usually, A lot of times there would be a teacher's assistant that would walk with that student, or a parapro that would be in that room with them when they went.
So the real quick question that precedes my other question or questions. So when I'm looking at the $200,000 in supply for sanitation PPE, does what you're talking about doing additional air filtration, does that fall under that, or is that in a different bucket or box?
So I think it's $100,000, but that would be, I guess it depends on the situation, right? We don't know if there's another wave, that comes through and we have to purchase more masks or sanitizers or cleaning equipment. That's kind of what that line item is there for now. Again, we can amend this grant as needed. So if COVID rates don't go up for, let's say, we could take that out and reallocate those funds elsewhere as we see needed. Maybe we need more intervention support down the road. Maybe the curriculum updates are going to cost a little bit more than we initially estimated, so we'll be able to reallocate that as we move through the process. And again, we'll be bringing those at our 6-month updates as we move through this.
Oh, okay, and it's always good to have some flexibility, and I understand that. I would just offer my opinion that it kind of, at this point, when I look at the $200,000 for PPE and sanitation and $80,000 for mental health services and supports, I think that those numbers almost should be like flipped. Like that's where the primary need is now, my opinion, is a lot of the mental health problems that have come from lockdowns and masking and just general, sorry.
Yeah, they're pretty close. It's 100,000, not 200. Well, I know it's a little confusing to read because it's one line item and then it totals it.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Nope, you're fine.
And just the other thing just caught my eye is for all the curriculum updates from K through 12, that totals like about something like $2.2 million, maybe a little bit more. I mean, that's a massive expenditure per student. That's like $500 per student. And I'm wondering what it is that warrants that. I mean, math curriculum, it's really, competent math teachers know how to teach math. It's not a wheel that gets reinvented every 10 years. I just wonder if you could kind of explicate the need for that. I mean, that's a really big expenditure is on the curriculum.
Yep, so, and again, it's hard to know what exactly the curriculum will cost until we go through the process, which is a very long process. We'll get with our curriculum teams, look at everything that we need to do to meet the state standards, where our curriculum is now, research, testing, piloting different products. I know in a previous district, and I kind of got some of these numbers, they went through a curriculum update just to replace science curriculum, and this was pre-COVID. And I think the price tag for that was almost $500,000 at the time. And again, we have that flexibility as we see these go up and down that we can make changes as needed. So this is, again, kind of like the proposed budget. This is our first best guess at what we'd like to spend the money on.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. So this is winging it too, just based on these figures and information. I realize that you all have received an enormous amount of money for this COVID stuff, COVID pandemic, which is questionable whether it was a pandemic or not, and why the purpose for it happening. But to continue to say, oh, we need to do this for this pandemic, if there was one, it was a long time ago. But I realize you have to say that in order to use these funds. I'm just boggled, and I'm going to speak later, but to use these funds, why we've got to come up with a way to use the funds that really help the children increase their academic learning, not all this social. And I mean, I know there are students who have issues that need a break room, okay? I'm not saying against that, but I think it's becoming the norm as opposed to the exceptions. And we need to be using these funds for tutors and programs that encourage kids that want to learn and increase their reading ability, their math skills, their science, the desire to be highly employed in our societies, not all this social stuff. And I don't know how you can come up with it, but I think you need to come up with ways to use these funds for academic purposes, not all this garbage that's being thrown at us. So thank you very much.
I just want to know what the acronym LEA is, please. I'm not familiar with that. Local Education Agency. Thank you.
Is there any more community input or questions on anything related to the ESSER 3 grant? All right, I'll give it back to Angela then.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. So at this time, I will close the public hearing for the ESSER 3 hearing. So at this time, I will call our meeting to order and welcome you all to our June board meeting. It's not on our agenda, but what we normally do is the pledge, so that's what we're going to do now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Oxley, we're ready for the roll call.
Ms. Hamilton,
Present.
Mrs. Brown, Mr. White,
Here.
Ms. Hunt. Here. Mrs. Simonetti,
Here.
Mrs. Fitzgerald, and Mrs. Mitchell.
Here. Okay, we are on approval of the agenda, so at this time I would entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
Second.
I would like to request that the HR be pulled from the consent agenda, please.
Okay, that's line item 21-22-140. So we will move that to the first action item. So at this time, I would entertain a motion for approval of the amended agenda.
Support our motion.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Shalonda. Any deliberation? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Number 4, we are on the superintendent's report, so I will pass it over to Mr. Beal.
Thank you very much. To start with tonight, the Michigan Association of School Boards has awarded Ms. Cheryl Simonetti an award of distinction, Certificate of Achievement for a Level 3 award of distinction. This is awarded upon completion of the certification levels 1 and 2, for 200 or 300 level classes and a minimum of 208 educational credits. We want to acknowledge Ms. Simonetti for her work and service to the Board of Education and the students of Jackson Public Schools. So on behalf of MASB and Jackson Public Schools, congratulations, Ms. Simonetti. All right, Ms. Giannetti, your report for the month of June?
Sure. So this is a lot of thank yous. I first wanted to thank all that were involved with the Alglick Youth Football Camp. It was a huge success, and we are grateful for what they do for our community. We also had our end of the year picnic, which was attended by over 600 staff members. and a great time was had by all. We had some really good food from our local vendors, and they just really knocked it out of the park. But what was even more impressive than that was the community outreach that we did for donations, and we were able to give a little over $5,000 worth of prizes to our staff, and it was a blast. We got to put together baskets and tiger tickets and fire pits and just a whole bunch of things, and it was really, really a fun event. And one of the things we learned about the end of the year picnic is what our staff wants to do is eat, socialize, and win. So we certainly did that this year, and I'd like to thank the committee that helped me work on that. Lois Downing was a big part of the success of that, along with a lot of other people, Jessica Carter, Michelle Oxley, and Rachel Hemry, who did a lot of the work. And I appreciate everybody who put their time in to do that. It is no easy feat to do those events, and it's always nerve-wracking just because we so much want to say our appreciation and show it for our staff, and that gives us a really great opportunity to do so. And each staff member, everybody walked away with a gift too. Everybody got a phone, one of the lay-down phone chargers, a metal straw, and then also a decal for their car. So nobody left empty-handed, but there was a lot of food and a lot of fun had. So I just wanted to say thank you to our community sponsors who came through in ways I couldn't even imagine. So we did send out a thank you, but I just wanted to say it here publicly because it was huge for us. We also, just on a side note, our next event is August 22nd. That will be our opening day, and that too will be a big event for our employees. And that one we see sometimes close to 800 people come to on opening day, and that's August 22nd. And I'd like to invite you all to that. We will be doing food trucks again outside and some other events, and of course a giveaway for our staff. And it's always a great way to start off the year. A couple of other notes that I just wanted to make sure that I covered was that we just completed an EOP training, which is our emergency operation plan. So consistently at JPS, we are working on all of our emergency procedures at every building. Our staff is introduced to a new subject each month at their staff meetings, plus we work on some bigger trainings. And so I think it was yesterday or the day before, I can't even remember, the week's so long. We did an emergency operation tabletop where we simulated what it would be like to have an evacuation. So that was one of our practice with all of our administration, and these are really important for us to do because they really talk about a lot of the things that you don't necessarily think about in an emergency. All of our buildings have gone through active shooter training except for our administration building and our operations building, and we are doing that next Tuesday. And we continually rotate through all of our schools to do that over the year and into next year, so at least everybody gets a training once a year. I cannot stress enough about how safety and security is important to JPS, and these trainings talk and put us through situations that make us understand all that is necessary logistically and safety-wise, and we are appreciative of the partnerships that we have with our police department and our fire department when these emergencies occur. And so when you see drills at school, we do tornado, we do fire, and we do lockdown drills. It's imperative that we do this. This is the times we are in, and it is important to us that we make sure that our staff and students understand how important it is, and we ask that our parents embrace it as well. This is something that we need to do and that it is important for our staff. And William has led that committee of our EOP committee for the last 3 years, I think. So we look forward to continuing that work even though he's leaving us. And I'm super sad he's leaving us. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that as of Friday at afternoon, all of our students, except for our summer school students, will be out of school, and Hunt will be taking their break. So you will see a lot of rested teachers and students all over the community. Please, if you see a teacher, thank them for the work they did this year. The rest of us will not be off, and we'll be getting ready for next year.
Thank you, Chris. Up next in the superintendent's report is the 98B benchmark assessment report, and what I would do is draw your attention to that. If you follow along in the links, there's a lot of information in here. Each school has a page. It shows we're required by law to report out where we're at in the first board meeting in February, and then again no later than the last day of the school year, which for us, our last day of our fiscal year is June 30. So what you will see is a breakdown of students by gender, by ethnicity. You'll see them by grade, and it's specific to reading and math. You can see the growth set aside by each grade or each subject in specific reading and math. So there's a lot there. I would draw your attention to it and ask you, please, if you have questions. Mr. Patterson will be able to handle the secondary, and I'd ask you just to reach out because, again, going through the report line by line, we'd be here all night just doing that. And then Ms. Baker will handle elementary, so if you have questions, please don't hesitate to email or reach out, and they can walk you through those. These will all be posted on our website, so if you don't have an agenda in front of you, this information's out there and easily accessible. And that concludes the superintendent's report for the month of June.
Okay, thank you. We are on number 5, the consent agenda. So at this time, I would entertain a motion for approval of the amended consent agenda. Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Shalonda. Any deliberation? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. We are on number 6, citizens requesting to address the board, and I have a few here. Just a reminder, there's a 5-minute timeline and then there's no back and forth, but we appreciate your input. So the first one up is Amy Gish.
But it does look nice.
Can you hear me? Is that good? Okay. This is a quote from Maya Angelou. "It is only out of ignorance that people are cruel, because they really don't think it will come back." The philosophy of the board includes, quote, "The citizens shall be urged to bring their aspirations and concerns about the district to the attention of this body," end quote. During board comments, 5 of you have taken time to discourage this. In fact, one has stated she would like to, quote, "argue back." I don't take time to present facts so you can argue back. I have been asking that matters be investigated. You all have chosen not to act. I continue to bring matters to you because that is the philosophy of the board, regardless of who the members are, regardless of your attitudes, regardless of your failures to act over and over and over again. It's nobody's fault but your own that you don't read or know policy. Your excuses have been, we work full-time, we don't get paid to be a school board member, and you don't know what we do. Pitiful. Everyone has 24 hours in a day, even the President of the United States. If you do not have time for this service, then resign. Don't run again. You're hurting this community by taking a seat away from someone who does have the time to devote to this body, to this district, to this community. By taking a seat away from someone who is willing to do the work, you are robbing the families of our community you were elected to serve. So resign. Don't run again. This community doesn't need pitiful excuses. This community is on an upswing in many areas, and you have voted to create an image and protect it. We live here. We see beyond that false image. Even those who are new to the community learn those lessons quickly. Hunt parent Mrs. Inman shared her experiences with you not too long ago and said some very strong messages that stayed with me. For you, likely in one ear and out the other. I say that because that's your track record. You're tired of hearing it, but it's the truth. You've heard from many different stakeholders who are telling you the same thing. Your reaction? It's orchestrated. It's pile on, but it's not. It's the truth, and sometimes the truth hurts. As I drive through the city of Jackson every spring, I'm always amazed to see the graduation signs in the front yards. Vandercook Lake, Northwest, East Jackson, Western. The list goes on and on. So many of our families no longer believe in Jackson Public Schools. That makes me sad. Even worse, as many times as teachers have encouraged district administrators to reach out to those families to find out why those families left us, nobody has ever done so. We even asked for a third neutral party to conduct exit interviews to find out why teachers have left in droves over the years, pre-pandemic. Nobody was interested in that information either. You're satisfied with the goodbyes. Often we hear administrators make up false reasons why these families and teachers have left, and you're satisfied with the lies. Even when the truth comes out. I didn't leave because my new school district has air conditioning, as the superintendent had announced to the board. But it doesn't matter. That math teacher is gone, along with a lot of other math teachers, along with a lot of other teachers. I believe someone doesn't want you to know the real reasons for their departures. I believe someone doesn't want you to know why our families leave. And as his supporters, you're good with that. Groupthink, no dissent. 5 votes one way, 2 the other. 2 people, 2 board members, who are working hard to represent their constituents. 2 who maintain two-way communication with them in order to serve them as an elected official should. I'm proud of them. Your community is already benefiting from your ethical work in representing all students, all families at Jackson Public Schools. Other board members have tried to stand in your way and keep you from doing what you're doing. But you two move forward for our families anyway, while the Board 5 serve the pleasure of the superintendent. If this weren't so, I'd be addressing Libby Brown as board president right now. The board minutes from the December 14th, 2021 board minutes includes who all wanted what position. Angela would like to remain president. Shalonda will remain a trustee. Pam would be interested in vice president. Cheryl would like to remain treasurer. Aaron would be happy to serve in whatever capacity is needed. Libby expressed that this procedure is being done differently, told that she would be the next president. Keisha not seeking officer position. So, Angela got what she wanted. Pam got what she wanted. Shalonda got what she wanted. Aaron got what he wanted. Then there's Libby. I know the games that these people play.
Thank you,
Libby.
Amy. Your time's up.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Stephanie Chiswick? Cizik, sorry.
Superintendent Beal, members of the school board. I'm Stephanie Cizek, I think you know that. Retired Spanish teacher from Jackson High School. And Parkside before that, et cetera, et cetera. The language of policy number 1230, responsibilities of the superintendent, states that the superintendent shall strive to achieve district goals by providing educational direction and supervision to the professional staff and support staff by acting, quote, as a proper model for staff and students both in and outside the district, unquote. Because the superintendent is supposed to be modeling appropriate behavior according to policy number 1230, bullying and harassing are not appropriate. The superintendent should be modeling all behavior that is subject to students and staff per board policy. Anti-harassment language appears in both student and staff board policies. The superintendent should be modeling these required behaviors. Superintendent Beal is known for bullying and harassing staff and students to the extreme. Those who have addressed the board by reporting the superintendent's extreme acts of bullying and harassment and intimidation are advocating for others because they know a good educational system cannot be managed by fear and intimidation. It is not only exhausting to be on the receiving end of the superintendent's harassing and radical bullying tactics, but these tactics go way beyond yelling, finger pointing, and body language. But as you've heard from some addressing the board, there are other more damaging non-physical forms of harassment, often to the severe detriment of the victims, whether student, parent, or staff member. You, the board, have had many individuals come forward to report such behaviors, and you, the board 5, have done nothing. This not only enables the superintendent to continue this abusive behavior, but this abuse has escalated to extremes because no one's restraining him. This is the major reason that students and staff have been leaving the district. As of late, there are actually more resignations than new hires. They have no recourse because you, the Board 5, have abandoned those duties and thus abandoned your fellow human beings. If you, the Board 5, are satisfied with the way things are, and it appears that you are, then who knows what will happen to citizens in the path of this runaway train before it crashes. And you, the board, are and will be held accountable. Food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Joanna Perkins.
I'm Joanna Perkins, retired English teacher, English chair, and building committee chair. I'd like to preface by saying I find it really ironic that we all stand up and put our heart over our chest to pledge the allegiance when this board is so replete with corruption and inequality. At the last board meeting, information regarding Jeff Beal and Jeremy Patterson being found guilty of retaliation in a court of law all the way to the Supreme Court as of late was brought forth. Additionally, information regarding Jeremy being hired as a principal without the criteria of a master's and 10 years of teaching, and also having a drunk driving on his record while the athletic director was fired under JPS's no tolerance policy, was brought forth as well. Even further, I disclosed a quick reminder of the litany of upstanding credible victims whom have come forth regarding Superintendent Beal's incessant and brazen harassment, retaliation, and abuse of a myriad of women. Inquiries were made regarding what discipline would entail as it concerns Superintendent Beal and Jeremy Patterson's reprehensible behavior of retaliation, now validated by the law. I asked you, the board, how do these individuals maintain their employ? How? Today, I not only ask that, but how does this despicable behavior not only go undisciplined, but instead rewarded, as Jeremy Patterson has now been elevated into his brother's former position of assistant superintendent? How? Just how? As I stated in one of my previous addresses to you, the board, you have gone from enabling Superintendent Beal's brazen abuse and lawlessness to actually mimicking his lawlessness. Pam Fitzgerald, during the comment portion of the March board meeting, you stated that Superintendent Beal inherited the Kelly Pennington and Penny Davis debacles. Not only was Beal in his position during both, but he was actually one of the main persons behind feverishly tormenting Penny, which he has now been found guilty of in a court of law. Your lies misled the remaining board who don't bother to fact check, the board 5, I mean. the individuals present and watching board meetings, the public and the news media by painting a very false narrative. Shame on you. Shame on you. Board policy states that we are to bring issues of concern to you, the board, yet everything brought forth during our employees and during the last 4 board meetings have been ignored. You as a board continue to do absolutely nothing, thereby making you just as guilty. All it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. However, not only do you continue to fail at your moral and legal obligations of due diligence, as everything being presented to you continues to go uninvestigated, but several of you actually work to create false narratives supporting the evil doings and becoming evildoers yourselves. Furthermore, the district's lawyer, Brendan Beer, stated in an email to the board that it would be, in quotes, in your best interest not to talk to Amy or Joanna. Again, board policy states that we are to bring concerns to the board, yet we are being isolated from that very thing. Not only was Jeremy hired as principal through nepotism while not possessing 10 years of teaching or a master's with a drunk driving on his record, but currently found guilty of retaliation in a court of law. But you, the board, have elevated him not only to assistant superintendent, but he will also be assuming the role of anti-harassment compliance officer. And I ask you again, how is this possible? Let me reiterate so folks can wrap their brain around this one. Not only are Superintendent Beal and Jeremy Patterson going undisciplined for their despicable actions, they are now officially guilty of in a court of law, but Jeremy Patterson is actually being promoted into his brother's former position of assistant superintendent, and he will be assuming the role of anti-compliance officer, the very thing he is guilty of? That would be like not putting Harvey Weinstein in jail and then hiring him to run the anti-sexual assault unit. Laughable, despicable. How, just how is this possible? Then again, you as a board have allowed Superintendent Beal to hire himself as HR director and FOIA coordinator, so his utter lawlessness just continues and is being supported by you, the Board 5, the very individuals who have been elected to serve, uphold, and protect. Shame on you.
Thank you,
Consider
Joanna.
this yet another whistleblower.
Next up, Marcy Jankovic.
My name is Marcy Jankovic. I am a resident of the Jackson Public School District and the grandma of a second grader. One of the things I would like to bring up, I brought up before, which is acronyms. One of the things I would like to bring up that I brought up before is acronyms. I wish somewhere, once in a document, you would define the acronym. Many of us lay people don't understand them. To me, an LEA is a law enforcement agency, okay? Secondly, I've been attending these meetings since last August. It's going on almost a year now. The same dead horse gets beat every meeting against Superintendent Beal. The same things are said. I don't appreciate it much. I would note that this board hired an independent investigator to investigate allegations of bullying. He was found not to have bullied in that instance, and I would suggest that sometimes bullying or harassment might be a thing in the eye of the beholder. We might not all define it the same way. The next thing I would like to say is CRT, and now I'm beating a dead horse, I know. So I'm not going to be doing that much more. You know by now that we know CRT is being implemented through social emotional learning and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Equality means everyone plays by the same rules. That's objective. Equity is whatever some six-figure bureaucrat administrator decides it is, subjective. So it's evident that you're going to continue to implement this program. It first came to the attention of the board last March. And I've had conversations with Dr. Linda Lee Tarver, who is running for State Board of Education, and I don't know if you know this wonderful woman of color, not that she cares about that or I, is not only a doctor in education, she's a former member of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. And she expressed concerns as boards of education consider these programs, that you investigate them very carefully because school districts are being sued for violating civil rights under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. You don't have to go very far to learn about that. You can go right up the road to Holt. So you need to be aware. I'm not saying you can't hire one, but please be very careful about how you craft a job description and have excellent oversight of the programs that are offered by a DEI coordinator with their six-figure salary and their staff support that could be used for tutoring students instead. So proceed with caution. We want our funds spent on education, not indoctrination or legal fees and costs and damages, and we'll do our homework. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next up is Jennifer Bidinger.
Hello again. Thank you for allowing us to speak about our concerns. For years, the humanistic anti-God theologies have been overtaking the education of our children through the public education system. Many chose to avoid this indoctrination by enrolling in private schools or homeschooling. But now we are reaping a lawless society of adults that have no respect for authority, morals, or consequences for their actions. And I believe that many of the excellent teachers are leaving because their consciences will not allow them to continue their desires to teach because of the revised curriculum based on false humanistic ideologies. It's all about self-awareness, self-management, and making decisions based on how you feel. I think I missed one, but these are the 3 of the 5 competencies of SEL learning. The other 2 categories are social awareness and relationship skills. Stop wasting time and resources focusing on indoctrination. These are children. They need to be taught truth. The truth is learning to love and respect others and obey your parents and your authorities, listening to wise counsel and learning from our history, whether it's good or bad. Our current media and often our schools are teaching children to disregard these truths and abide by the corrupt media that instills rebellion against parents, against law officers, and against the law, and against anyone who questions the current administration. Citizens all over the country are standing up against this tyranny. I hope and pray that you, as our school board leaders, will be able to also say that you will not be pressured into following along with the unlawful demands. We, the people, are fed up. We will not negotiate with domestic terrorists. And now recently we've heard of the Biden administration threatening to withhold funds for food programs unless schools comply with the immoral liberal agendas. Outrageous. Punishing the children if we don't go along. This ideology has become a theology forced on all. Imagine if we were required to wear head coverings and pray at certain times of the day or suffer the consequences. America has protections under the Constitution that give us the freedom to make these choices. As Christians, God has clear statements that reprove the lifestyles of homosexuality. So to force this agenda would be to violate our constitutional rights. Do not be a part of this mistake. If this small group of citizens who do have a right to make their own choices and live their lives as they choose, if they require an environment of all inclusion, they must start their own public education system, not infringe on the personal rights of everyone else. Let me pose another situation. Imagine a conservative ideology where the people thought that only wearing red, white, and blue was acceptable for our citizens. People who don't wear red, white, and blue are offending those who hold it as a conviction. Schools that don't instill this ideology will have benefits taken away. Ridiculous, right? Not to mention unconstitutional. In addition, this theology has everything to do with teaching human sexuality. According to the revised school code, which I read, this kind of instruction is to be taught by teachers qualified to teach health education and with the full permission by the parents and guardians after reviewing the materials to be used. Teachers that are teaching this material, whether by verbal or textbook instruction, are not abiding by the state's code and will be subject to legal consequences. And it also states that the district shall not offer this instruction unless the Sex Education Advisory Board is established. So I don't know whether that exists for the Jackson Public Schools. On a personal note, I myself am disgusted, and many other parents, grandparents, and citizens, that some teachers in our state are abusing the minds of our children with their crude images and influences. We need to focus on raising the standards of education through improved reading, math, and science skills, and using funds for this purpose, not spending money on revised curriculum that promotes false doctrine. Teaching truth, which means that God created male and female, whether other influences try to manipulate and confuse with their ideologies, do not conform the mixed gender theologies in regards to playing sports or changing bathrooms, which lead to even bigger problems. Please stand up to protect all of our children and get back to promoting excellence in education for our future. Thank you. I didn't think I'd get that all in, so that's why I rushed.
Did, 13 seconds to spare.
Thank you.
Okay. William Hastings?
I really don't have any prepared remarks, just a few off-the-cuff observations. The first two are concerning the budget. So earlier this year, I had some discussions with, is it Lois Dunning? Okay. About the laundry initiative at the school and what they needed in terms of support to go moving forward. And she said there is a great need for the students who are doing their laundry at school to have canvas laundry bags. And I was just going to throw this out here, and there's just gobs of money in that ESSER 3, and that would be like a blip. So if that's just something you could consider.
I'd just let you know that we are funded through the laundry fund by donations, so we have donations for those bags already.
Okay.
And it is also at the Jackson Community Foundation, there's a fund there as well.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
take donations, but we also do have some dollars already allotted
Okay.
from donations, but thank you.
Okay, glad to hear that's funded. Just at the time I had the discussion, it was a need. The second thing is I had a chance recently to spend some time in the Welcome Center. I was escorting some incoming ninth graders who are going to be who are taking their algebra test out exam, and I was just impressed. I just want to comment that it's really taking a good look around in the wake of obviously what just happened in Texas and other just horrendous incidents that I think that the board, current and past boards, and the superintendent have been very prudent in investing money in hardening the school and taking affirmative steps to keep something terrible from happening. And I think it's very good that you have some JPS or JPD officers on site. And just to wrap it up, I wish the teachers were here to thank them in person. But my daughter just concluded what I thought was an outstanding academic year, which would not have been possible with outstanding teachers. They were all good. They're all very good. But just, I mean, at the top of the top, Mrs. Burns, AP Statistics, I believe she's retiring. Frau Adams, AP German, I think she's taking kind of a senior status, sort of retiring. Anyway, it's no. And then at the tippy top, Mr. Shaner, fabulous, almost living legend. And at the top of my list, the best of the bunch is Mr. Lowe's, your AP chemistry teacher, did an absolutely outstanding job, and really helped my daughter have an outstanding junior year, which really is the critical year when you're trying to get ready for college. So thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Linda Larry Robinson. Linda and/or Larry.
Good evening. I'm Linda Larry Robinson, worked for the district for 32 years. For those of you that don't know me, I've worked with some of you, and I've even taught one of you, and I am here 2, I have a concern about student achievement. I worked at Northeast Elementary with the retired teachers group, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with the staff and the students there. My concern is the student ability gap. In one classroom, first grade, second grade, you can have students working at a kindergarten level and students working at a 5th grade level, especially in reading. And the classroom teachers really, really need more support. I have data to support my concern. Of course, my data is very limited because it's only with the children that I have worked with this past year. But I would be very, very happy to share this data with you. I also would like to know if there are any funds available for the retired teachers to get an increase in pay, and also to expand the program. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns. I'd be happy to discuss this further with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we are on number 7, discussion items. So the first one is 21-22-148, board comments. So Cheryl?
I took this to Angela as an agenda item because I had gotten some feedback from no less than a dozen community members asking whether we limit the time frame on board comments. One of the people who contacted me was actually a board member in a neighboring district who said that they limit board comments to 3 minutes. So all of these people were concerned about the length of time that is involved in board comments, and Angela said we could put it on for discussion if anyone felt the need to discuss that further.
Any other comments?
Just to clarify, are we talking about board comments at the end of the board meeting, or?
Yes, it was specific to the agenda item that is titled board comments.
Cheryl, are you proposing that we limit it to a certain time period then?
I'm just representing the people that contacted me and sharing their concerns about the time that's involved.
Thank you.
I mean, I do think we should reduce it when we're giving 5 minutes to the community. I think that it would be appropriate if we had the same conditions, because I think some members are stating it and restating it and stating it in a different way, and it's just going on and on.
I think there also should be some consideration about the process in which the board members give their feedback. I think typically it's at this end and then maybe the next month at the other end. So if we can have like a variation of whoever feels compelled once that agenda item has been, has come up, that whoever would like to initiate their comments will feel, have that liberty to do so.
Seems like we've done that too. I've been on since 2017, and former board presidents, even before I did, would at times start from this end of the table or randomly ask. Many board members throughout the time that I've been here, some have never been compelled to really have any comments. And it seems like recently we've been kind of very methodical about going one by one, but I don't believe there's any set precedent or something in stone on how we have to do it.
All right, anything else? Okay, the next line item is 21-22-149, elementary handbooks. So I will pass that over to Julie.
We reviewed the common pages for the elementary handbooks, and we did a pretty thorough job of cleaning those up last year. We didn't find any areas. We were thinking that we still had pagers in the code of conduct, and that was taken out previously. So we're not suggesting any changes for the elementary common handbook pages.
All right, and this is a discussion item, so again, take a look at the common the common pages. You'll see the changes that are highlighted in that template, and then if you have questions, you can reach out to Julie, and then we'll bring this back for action at our July meeting.
Okay, thank you. Next line item is 21-22-150, Secondary Handbooks. So, William?
Thank you. Same here. Each year, the secondary principals review the common pages. Mrs. Oxley is gracious enough to sit in with us to kind of take notes of our discussion and capture some of those changes. All those changes have been highlighted in the attached document. No action required at this time, but the common pages will be presented for the approval at the July board meeting.
Question. Do we know when the last time was that we updated the full handbook? When's the last time it's been reviewed?
I'm sure each year, each year we review I don't know at what time the whole handbook was reviewed, but every year we are eliminating and adding new language. But as far as the entire handbook, I'm not sure.
Does anybody know that?
I wouldn't think in my 8 or 9 years that the whole handbook was.
So we review the common pages each year, but not the full handbook?
The whole handbook is reviewed. I know the principals, we review those, even the pages that are common to the buildings, those are kind of reviewed at the building level. But the common pages we all come together and review them.
So this might be for Jeff, I don't know. When does the board get to review the reviews that they do? When do we review that stuff in the main handbook?
That's not board material. That's actually school district material. So the board approves the common pages because those reflect the policy changes. So the board actually doesn't ever touch the individual or the whole handbook. It really is only touching the common pages pertaining to policy.
Thank you. So the main book, the full book, it doesn't reflect board policy, you said?
It reflects the school building. So the common pages are those pages that are approved by the board, consistent with board policy. The individual policies specific to a building are programmatic in how the building is operated, and no, those don't come before the board.
So the board can't hold those pages accountable. Is that what you're saying? We have nothing to do with those pages?
Those are not functions of the board. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I would just ask of the board, if there are suggestions for changes, that somehow they get to Julie and William early so that we can see them before we come to the July meeting. I know that last year there were numerous changes suggested on the day of the meeting where we were to approve them. I found that very difficult. We didn't have anything in writing in front of us. We didn't have anything prior to coming to this meeting for those changes, and I was very uncomfortable with the way that went down. So if the board members have changes, I would like to see us get them to Julie and William in advance.
Okay, thank you. Any other deliberation, discussion? Okay, next line item is 21-22-151, valedictorian committee proposal. Jeff?
Actually, I think Jeremy and Willie are going to participate in this conversation. I think, Willie, you're going to take lead, and Mr. Patterson, and then this is for discussion at this point, so we're not asking for a vote. They'll share with you the work of the committee, and then Ms. Pierce will be here in the month of July to be able to make a recommendation for adoption.
All right, so I am standing in for Mrs. Pierce. I am a poor substitute for her, but I will do my best to take into consideration and to share with you all the discussions that we had over the course of 6 meetings. We had Mrs. Pierce sent out feelers to a number of different community members, including students and parents and former valedictorians and community members, and we ended up with a committee of about 9 folks who met regularly. We ended up with six meetings, and over those course of those 6 meetings, we took into consideration a number of different ideas to sort of look at the way that we came up with the valedictorian for graduation. When we walked into that conversation, we knew that the 2018 policy was not well received, and we also knew that the previous policy of just having a 4.0 was not necessarily well received as well. And so we tried to come up with a definition that would help to drive that conversation. And when you look at the packet or look at the handout, the definition that was determined was a valedictorian is a student or students typically having the highest academic achievements of the class. And we began there. The work that we went through, we sent Mrs. Raymond back with a bunch of homework each meeting, and we talked about issues of equity. We looked at including the SAT. We talked to other districts around the county and within the SEC to see if our policies match what theirs look like and whether or not we were doing things that were out of the norm. We surveyed 4.0 students and parents of 4.0 students. We reached out to parents that we felt had a We reached out to parents and students to get their opinion on on the direction that we were going with this. And at the end of the day, the policy that we landed on was this proposal here, and I'll read it verbatim so that way the language is important so that we're all on the same page. It says, students must have a cumulative GPA of 4.0 for all earned credits, including high school credits acquired at the middle school level. The retaking of a course for a better grade will not be used in computation for valedictorian. Independent studies will not be considered in the computation for selection for valedictorian. Additionally, for the class of 2027, and that's an amendment, that's an amended piece that's in your packet because it says 2026, and we knew that the students that were already had picked their courses, we wanted to make sure that this included, this did not include those students, the 6th graders who had already decided on the courses that they're taking. So we said we should make it valid for the class of 2027 and beyond. The following must be met, that students must take a minimum of 6 advanced placement, dual enrolled or early college courses in any combination. And we did that mainly because we knew that trying to weight those in terms of its rigor or how they were designed was really problematic. And we also wanted to make sure that we made this an equitable practice, making sure that we could give students the support they needed to drive out to courses or to have courses on campus, that all students had access to all of those classes. And at the end of the day, we came up with a pretty close to consensus, a group consensus. I think we had 1 or 2 members that were on the fence, but we came up with that policy, and that's what we're proposing to bring forward for you all. What questions do you have?
I had just one while it's on the top of my mind. Just looking at the first paragraph, just clarification. So if a student in the 8th grade takes a math course that would count as a high school credit and they do not get a 4.0, if they retake that course, let's say in the 9th grade, is that what that sentence means, is that retake will not be used in computation as valedictorian? So if they get a 4.0 in the 9th grade in that same course, that does not count?
That it doesn't as of right now.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe that, and Mr. Patterson, you can speak to this, but I believe when students take courses at the middle school level that are high school, that have high school credits attached to them, that there is a disclaimer that they have to sign to recognize that class does count in the calculation for GPA.
I just want to say kudos to Monica Pierce and the team for going back and doing their homework and just really seeking out people from all different levels, including the middle school. So I was contacted to reach out to students and parents and administrators, and I also like the communication plan, not waiting too late when you get to Jackson High to start having this conversation and beginning this conversation with the sixth grade. So when we do our orientation at the beginning of the year, the communication when you're signing up for classes, core syllabus, and just our offerings in general, to make sure everyone understands you might be in the 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, but this is high school credit, and there's that parent-guardian communication and signing off. And sometimes the students opt not to take that grade on their GPA because they want to strive to continue to do better. So they do have choice in the matter if they didn't get the grade that they were looking for, to try it again without penalty.
Do we know who exactly was on the committee? You said there were 9 people.
Yes, yes.
Can we know that?
Yep. Do you want me to list the 9? Oh, I don't have the list in front of me.
Were you in those meetings?
Yes. Yep.
Do you remember some?
Yep. Willie Paget. Oh my gosh. You calling me out on the myself. Mrs. Hutchinson was a parent. Mrs. Pierce, Cheryl Simonetti was she visited the last couple of meetings. Christy Dillon was a member of that committee as well. I'm drawing a blank on the young man's name. Can you say it again? Yes, Shafton Dunklin. That was another member. And Mike Mason. Yeah, that was another. Oh, yeah. Sam Elstead. He was a parent of a former valedictorian as well, and an instructor for us. Sam Elstead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you know what their positions are? So Willie Paget, she was a former admin here, is that correct?
Yep, and she's also a grandparent of a student. So she had a dual hat. Yeah. And the vote was anonymous, so we didn't necessarily ask who voted in which way.
Who is Mrs. Hutchinson?
Yep, she's a Huffman.
Huffman, thank you.
Yep.
Who is she?
She's a parent of a current student.
Valedictorian student or 4.0 student?
Yeah.
And Dylan, who's Shafton Duncan?
He's his parent. He's a parent of a middle school student and
Mike,
elementary student. Yeah.
Thank you. Mike Mason
is an educator.
And you said Sam Alston?
Yep. Yep.
Who is he? He
is an educator, but he's also a parent of a former valedictorian.
Thank you. One more question for you, or two maybe. Before we decided that they had to have these 6 advanced placement or dual enrollment or early college courses, and you may not have the answer to this, Jeff might. Did we ever have any special needs students who became valedictorian? Do they attend these? You don't know that answer. Jeff, do you know that answer?
I don't know that answer.
So do we, now it seems like, maybe Julie or Patterson, you might know, Dr. Patterson. Do any of our special needs students take advanced placement, dual enrollment, or early college courses? Do we know if they?
Yeah, I can answer that. Yes.
Okay.
I do know that we have students that have a label of special needs that are in our dual enrolled classes and our AP classes.
Okay, do we know if any of them, and you may not know this or not, do we know if any of them have become valedictorians?
Oh, I don't know that. No.
Does anybody? I'm really concerned about the way this has been, these minimum 6, because it seems like it would eliminate our special needs students. So anyways, that's one of my concerns, is that, this might eliminate our special needs students from being able to, place as valedictorians. Precious Armstrong, you said? What about her?
She was on the
committee.
Yeah.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I missed Precious.
Thank
You're
you.
Right.
Okay, I have a couple comments. I'm thrilled we're going to have some criteria that's specific. I do hope that at least at the high school, before the kids take their classes, they have a counselor, and I work with Jill all the time. I'm the liaison from JC at Jackson High for the Jackson County Early College Program and the special needs population. We have many students I work with who are labeled in some aspect or another. So yes, we have many kids in dual enrollment or JCEC. I'd like them to avoid the things like the short 5-week classes, the things that would just kind of set them up for fail, even if they were a regular age freshman, let alone the elementary, or excuse me, the middle school or the high school kids. But I think this is a step in the right direction for us, and I think it will need to be, as you know, explained to the parents, but I'd like to see any counselor along the way make sure the kids aren't put into something because it fits their schedule, but because it's appropriate for their area. A lot of kids shouldn't be taking, for example, English 131, and they get a B or a C, which is pretty common for that class, and they automatically can never be valedictorian. I think it's important, something you said, Jeremy, I didn't know, and that is that they could opt out of getting high school credit for it and then retake it in high school. That's an exceptional idea for these kids. My kids have gone through and taken, college classes along the way, and they always took it for high school and college credit together. And I was always in this panic about, well, what if they, bomb their their college class? So I think it's important that they're aware of that they can take the class for school credit and not have to transfer it to the high school unless the grade's high enough. So I'm pleased, to say the least.
I just have a concern about the 6 AP or dual enrollment classes, just in that number, because in the time that one student might take an AP class, it takes someone 3 trimesters to complete an AP class. Another student could take 3 separate dual enrollment classes. So I think it's inequitable right there that if you look at first hour versus second hour, someone could be done with all of their 6 dual enrollment classes in a 2-hour period, where it's going to take another student 6 full hours at some point in time to get 6 AP classes. Does that make sense?
Yep, and I believe we had that discussion in regards to the nature of how dual enrolled courses were set up, and that you could take them during the slots, and having the ability to take three courses of the course of the year. But I think the reason that we landed on the 6 is we looked at the opportunities during a high school career of having 18 slots per year, and saying that to say over the course of your high school career, you have 64 opportunities, and the minimum is 6 is that we're looking for. And at the same time, we know that we were putting together, during our discussions, we kept landing on the supports and backfilling the supports that we knew necessary to encourage and to support more students taking dual enrolled and AP classes at the same time that we're developing this plan. So that was not divorced of those two things, so that we could, in fact, help to encourage and see more students that we hadn't necessarily served in those courses up until this date, be present in those courses, but also making sure that we put together the supports to make sure that once they were in those courses, they could be successful. So having said that, or having that as a backdrop, we felt like 6 was a good number that would help to differentiate and give us and get us close to the definition, which is a student that is typically having the highest academic achievements of that class, giving them a rigorous experience while they were with us.
I would just say I appreciate the work of the committee. I think as a board, it's certainly important that we honor that work of the committee and the experts who took on that task. I think the rub from the previous, time this came up was more about communication. I know Mr. Patterson mentioned that. I actually sat through the 9th grade orientation with my own son, and I left out of that particular session crystal clear on what, at that time, the previous committee had established. I didn't walk out with any questions. I had all the material that I had, but the previous years, as you can recall, had been a little confused, and I think some of the outcry that I personally received was pretty significant, which obviously caused for the delay. But to regroup with the committee, I recognized most of those names on the committee, and to put that in your all hands as the true experts, I'm super confident with that. So, thank you.
I have a question for you. So I got distracted. My son was calling me, and when he calls 3 times in a row, I don't know if it's an accident or something like that, so I got distracted. But anyways, how was the committee chosen? Do we know how those names were chosen? Do we know who all was invited? Do we know that?
Well, I noted that Mrs. Pierce sent out a wide net. She sent out feelers to a number of different folks. So
Was this like, do you know if these were like just individual people that she put out, or was it like just,
I know that there was conversations with administrators and teachers at different levels asking for recommendations for folks, and there was also community members that were asked because of their connection to the programming, but then it was sent out in an email saying, we'd like to have you as a part of the committee.
Okay, because I know some people have wanted to participate. I'm wondering how much variety was on the, variety of thought was on the committee. I wonder if it was all just kind of, we all kind of think the same. How do we,
Absolutely not.
It wasn't like
Absolutely not. No, we were close to not having a consensus coming into this meeting because the divergent thoughts in terms of how we should define someone that has the highest academic standards, and making sure that when they went through what our treatment, which is Jackson High School's most rigorous courses, how could we determine who's in that, who makes that cut? And there was just a lot of discussion.
We probably also, I guess I should say, compare districts that look like ours. So I didn't see in here that we talked to neighboring districts here in the county. I know a lot of them don't necessarily look like JPS, especially our, our racial demographics.
Yep.
Did we look at schools that have a racial demographic similar to ours?
We did, yep.
Who was that? Do we know?
Those were SEC schools. So we looked at, for instance, Ypsi Lincoln looks a lot like us.
Okay.
And so we looked at the other SEC schools to look and see how are they determining it. What we did find is there's a lot of discussion going across the county, across the districts in Jackson County and across the state as to whether or not valedictorian status is something that they would rather value or walk away from. So I was happy that we are embracing something that we can honor our students that have worked really hard to get that status.
Thank you for answering my question.
Yep.
Currently, we don't have an amount, a certain number of students that are recognized as valedictorians. What was the conversation around that topic? Did we discuss how many should be considered a valedictorian, or?
I'm smiling because that we began with this notion of trying to somehow winnow it down and not have this expansive group. But as the discussions happened and we looked at what does it really mean, we began to understand that someone who's worked really hard to get this status, we shouldn't be putting barriers in place to limit that number. What we should be doing is making sure that the criteria is something that we can all hold to and say that meets the standard for what we believe is a rigorous experience and someone who has achieved the highest standards that we can ask for.
Thank you. I do appreciate the option that students will have for AP classes, dual enrollment, or early college courses. I think that provides them an opportunity. Some students are not ready to be thrust into that post-secondary experience. I appreciate the consideration that was made towards that.
I too just want to thank the work of the committee, and I think it's great that you did have special ed representation on there, such as Precious. I'm a special ed administrator, and I have been for 11 years, so I think it's great to consider that population, and although those kids have disabilities with their IEP, that helps level the playing field for those kids with accommodations and services and support. So I think that's great. Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving on to number 8 action items. So the first one will be the one that we pulled, 21-22-140, Human Resources. So first, I would entertain a motion for approval of the human resource items as presented.
So move.
Support. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Cheryl. Now deliberation.
I just wanted to inform the community that JPS continues to make an active effort to hire qualified teachers. And in this month's HR, we have 6 new teachers, 3 that are elementary teachers that are coming aboard, 1 that will be representing our middle school population, and then 2 teachers that will also be at our high school level. Of the 6 teachers, we have 1 teacher that actually completed her student teaching with Jackson High School, there's something to be said about going through your student teaching experience and then still desiring to be a part of JPS. Also, another new hire was a parapro and a substitute teacher. Again, just want to highlight that we have individuals that are coming to the district, you know, getting their feet wet, if you will, seeing if it's a perfect fit, if it's a blend for them, and they are accepting the offer to join the Vikings. And then as far as the resignations, just wanted to also highlight that exit interviews continue to take place. There is some discussion from the community or a misnomer or a myth that exit interviews are not happening. They are happening. We are collecting data, and it is, you know, we are getting our individuals, teachers, have the option to either participate in that exit interview virtually or in person. Just want to bring some awareness to our community to kind of like understand what's happening when other messages are being sent. Thank you.
Shalonda, I just would like to ask, have you seen the exit interviews? How do you know that they are existing for every person that exits the system?
I am not aware of every interview. I'm aware of some. I do not. I have not been privy to see every exit interview. No. No. I have been provided information and data.
So just to add to that, I have specifically asked for exit interviews, and Jeff and I agreed to, I think, quarterly, and I'm not seeing those exit interviews. And we also have mentioned that we want third-party exit interviews because, again, Jeff is the HR, you know, so it's a good reason for individuals to not necessarily be completely honest, not because they're dishonest individuals, but it's something about speaking to someone that you're, you know, fleeing from possibly. So it'd be nice if actually the exit interviews were not only occurring, that we were getting the data on it, and that they were third-party exit interviews. So hopefully maybe we can implement that at some point.
Trustee Hamilton, do you have a third-party recommendation that you're making for these exit interviews?
So Jeff Beal is our superintendent, and part of his job would be to offer us different suggestions of those third-party interviews. So that will be part of his job, and he could bring those back to the board table, and then we could review those and then decide from there.
So it's my understanding that the exit interviews are being done by Jessica Carter, not by Jeff Beal, and unless an employee specifically requests to have an exit interview with Mr. Beal, he is not conducting those interviews.
Okay, any other deliberation? Cheryl, did you have something?
Did you? So I did hear from one of the teachers who's on the resignation list for this year, Ben Burmeister, and he sent me a letter, which I would like to share. He said, this past week I turned in my letter of resignation to Mr. Beal in Jackson Public Schools. This letter is to publicly thank and praise the building and district administration for JPS, as well as to acknowledge incredible teachers and staff that are employed at JPS. 3 long years ago, I was hired as a 3rd grade teacher at Northeast Elementary. I was already a veteran teacher in Jackson County, but was new to Jackson Public Schools. I did not know much about JPS, and the little I did know did not paint the district in a positive light, whether because of test scores or student behavior and engagement, etc. It did not take long to realize JPS was and is so much more than that. COVID interrupted my first year teaching at Northeast. It became abundantly apparent just how strong our district administration was. I was fortunate enough to have been involved in communication and planning for our Return to Learn plan. Jeff Beal and his entire administrative team consistently put the needs of staff and students above all else. I was consistently impressed with the level of communication staff received and the collaborative nature of our plan. Not all districts sought input from teachers, counselors, and administrators. JPS did, and it was very much appreciated as we were thrown into unprecedented and unfamiliar waters of the pandemic. Additionally, I have always been supported by my building administrators. Eric Weatherwax is truly the best person I have met through education. When he left to accept the superintendent position at Jonesville, I was concerned how he could be replaced. However, Phil Van Allen and Sandy Martin filled that void better than I thought possible. They empowered and challenged the teaching and support staff daily to put the needs of the child first and the student second. They supported and encouraged us to take risks and try new things. I can say with conviction that I am a better teacher today because of the interactions I had with Eric, Phil, and Sandy. Not every principal is cut from the same cloth. I am so blessed to have worked with 3 administrators at Northeast that truly treat teachers with respect and professional courtesy. Jackson will always hold a special place in my heart. 3 years ago, I was given the opportunity to join the teaching staff at Jackson Public Schools. These have been 3 of the most challenging yet rewarding years of my teaching career. I have loved my time as a Viking and had no intention of teaching anywhere else. However, a few weeks ago, I was given the chance to teach in my home district where my 2 boys will attend in a couple of years. Additionally, my new school building is less than a mile from my home. Despite that, it was a difficult and agonizing decision to leave JPS. One of the reasons I joined JPS was because I believed the hype. 3 years later, it's what makes it so difficult to leave. Jackson Public Schools, under the guidance and leadership of Jeff Beal and administrators like Eric Weatherwax, Phil Van Allen, and Sandy Martin, is doing a lot of things right for teachers, staff, and most importantly, students. I believe in the vision, mission, and direction of Jackson Public Schools and know the district is in good hands. So I wanted to share that just to say that every resignation is not a negative thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the table for the HR. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next line item is 21-22-152, security cameras for Jackson High School Fieldhouse. Marcus.
As we move through our Fieldhouse project, we have come to the point to order security cameras for the building, just like we've done with all of our other projects. So in front of you, we have a quote from Presidio in the amount of $20,657.12. This is the same vendor, same type of cameras we've used throughout the district to be consistent with the rest of our projects. So we would recommend at this time approving the quote from Presidio for these cameras. This does not include the installation and cabling. This is just for the cameras. That quote will be coming at a later date.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the quote from Presidio in the amount of $20,657.12 as approved. I mean, as recommended. Sorry. Okay, thank you, Libby. Thanks, Aaron. Okay, any deliberation? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next line item is 21-22-153. This is the 2021-22-23 budget amendment. Marcus.
I know it's a little confusing. This is our 3rd budget amendment for 2021-22. As you know, we amend our budget 3 times throughout the year. This is our final amendment as we head into our audit season where we'll wrap up the books. So we have a copy of the overview of the final amendment for your review. And we would recommend approval of the budget amendment at this time. One thing to note on here at the bottom, we've done a lot of great things around the district this year, and we're still looking to add over $2 million to our fund balance this year.
At this time, I would entertain a motion for approval of the 2021-22-23 budget amendment as presented.
So.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Cheryl. Any deliberation? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next line item is 21-22-154, the 2022-23 budget adoption. Marcus.
All right, and just to continue from our budget hearing earlier this evening, every year the board is required by law to adopt a balanced budget prior to the beginning of each fiscal year. So again, the proposed budget that we laid out earlier today includes our best estimate of anticipated revenues and expenditures. And of course, we'll amend it throughout the year as we move through that and get final information. We've kind of summarized our millage rates that we talked about earlier in the evening as well. And at this time, we will recommend the adoption of the proposed millage rates as well as the budget resolutions that are included in this items packet, which you've not seen until this portion.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion for adoption of the proposed millage rate as well as the 2022-23 budget resolutions, including the general food service, student activity, debt service, and capital projects funds as presented. Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Aaron. Any deliberation? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Oops, now we are on number 9, board comments. Are there any board comments?
Yes, I do have board comments. So just a couple things. I would like clarity on what new business is, how we use that, you know, what that is. I'd like to understand what new business is. Just another reminder, you know, that I would like to see the exit interviews as a quarterly report like we did agree on. And I also would like third-party recommendations since that question was raised today. Thank you.
Okay, any other board comments?
Yeah, so I just want to, you know, you gotta take a step back and honor, I think, a few situations. You know, I came onto the board in 2017, and you know, William, I just wanted to thank you for the interactions that we've always had professionally here on the board. You were a huge support to me early on, and I think your demeanor and the way you've carried on and led in your position, it's truly appreciated. Mrs. Jarvie was recently promoted as a result of Jeremy's promotion, so a lot of good things in JPS. 3 principals within a year. I don't know if that's been really ever mentioned, but Eric Weatherwax's name recently came up, Marty Dubois, and obviously William. I think that's a symbol of leadership for those 3 individuals that come out of our district within 1 year. And you know, I don't need to address the other situations. I think the vast majority of people know the horrible distraction that is. So that's all I'll say on that.
I want to thank all of our teachers that really put in the hard work during this school year to offer instruction to our students. I feel we still have a ways to go, and I'm very optimistic that these ESSER 3 funds will help close some of those academic gaps, of the achievement gaps. I am a firm believer that additional services offered to not just our students, but our teachers as well, to address our social, emotional, mental health capacity would beautify our students, their experience moving forward. So thank you, teachers, for your hard work. We appreciate what you do. Your work is not going unnoticed.
I just wanted to say that it was so nice, all the great things that happened around the district at the end of the year that we were able to bring back, like the picnics, and field day was wonderful, not only for my kid, but I saw lots of kids having fun and smiling, and I heard from other schools as well. Graduation was fabulous, and then I just wanted to give kudos to Chris and her team for that end of the year staff party. I was able to make it over there for lunch, and it was quite amazing. So great job. And I heard from people afterwards too, like teachers that said that was so great, that they just felt good, and it was nice going out on just a positive, happy note with eating and winning and music, and that was all great. And then I too wanted to definitely thank the teachers, and I hope they enjoy a well-deserved summer break.
I'd like to thank you, Aaron, for your comments, because I'm glad that those things did not go unsaid, so I echo your comments on that. And also on the picnic, I thought it was awesome. It was a great time, and you lucked out on the weather, Chris. But to me, the one thing that really stuck out at that picnic was the camaraderie and the people. I mean, everyone was happy and laughing, and that was the one thing that I would take from that picnic.
Okay, and I too wanted to say, William, thank you for all you've done for the district, and good luck in your new position.
In addition to William, good luck. Jeremy, good luck. That's no small task. Those no small shoes to fill. Good luck, both of you guys.
Okay, we are on number 10, new business. There's no new business. Number 11 for the calendar, our next regular meeting is July 19th. And then also July, and it's here, thank you, Michelle. And then July 26th is the filing deadline for the November 8th school board election.
Can I ask a question? Michelle, can you add the opening day on the calendar for the next meeting? Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we are on number 12, adjournment, so I would entertain a motion for adjournment. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Cheryl. Any deliberation? Oh, I'm sorry, that was Shalonda with a second. Sorry, the straight line's getting me. Okay, any deliberation? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, opposed, motion carries. Thank you for coming and have a great night.